Welcome to the Invested Teacher Podcast with Kyle Pierce, Matt Bigley, and John Orr.
Get ready to be taught, folks, as we share our successes and failures encountered during our real-life lessons, learning how to build generational wealth from the ground up.
Welcome, invested students, to another episode of the Invested Teacher Podcast.
Well, my friends, we welcome Matt back to another episode here. Busy Matt is
Good to be
actually
here. Good to be here.
I think, Matt, it's thinking of the work that you're doing, and you've missed a few episodes because of the work you're doing and how busy you are. And I think it's a great way for us to dig right into today's topic. We heard a quote recently, and it really resonated with all of us. And interestingly enough, I mean, obviously it sort of resonated with us in a similar fashion, but slightly different ways. But we wanted to bring it up because I think also it could come off and you might take maybe a different interpretation of.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways.
Right?
You can interpret this for sure. There's a couple of ways you can interpret. I think the phrase, the saying. I think, Kyle, you were just having a conversation with a colleague about this idea of work, of dedication, and achieving success at high levels. And I think you had like that. That's where that phrase came from. But I think it tied into a phrase that I think most people think about. Like where as long as I do this, then this is what's going to happen. So give us some insight onto that part of the conversation, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I was asking a colleague this is an insurance advisor, and we were chatting and kind of going down the rabbit hole. And I'm always, everyone listening, we're all learners. And so this person was actually supposed to be asking me questions, but I kind of flipped it on them because this person's been in the industry for over 40 years, was a wealth of knowledge. I could tell that right away, was very personable. We got right into the call, totally off topic. So we just kind of went down the rabbit hole, getting to know one another. And, we were just kind of asking questions back and forth. And the question I posed was, I asked, and I was curious, I had a hunch, I said, especially in the insurance industry, financial planning, financial advisory, all of in that world, it's kind of very similar sort of landscape. And I said, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges for a advisor when, in becoming successful? And, this particular individual said, and this is where this quote popped up, and he said, it's like the quote, they think that 90% of success is just showing up. And I had to look it up. I'm like, I've heard that before, but I didn't know who said it, but supposedly it was Woody Allen who said it. And it was interesting because the way I understood him to mean it in that regard was that, like, people are thinking that as long as you just like get up and do it, that everything else is going to work out. And it's almost like nothing more than that. And right away I was like, agreed with him. I'm like, absolutely. I'm like, wow, that is really interesting, because I feel like in so many different industries, there are people who get into an industry, they get hired, and let's say it's like a career. We're not just talking like a part-time job or sort of, a low skill job, right? Where it's, just manual labor or whatever it might be. What I feel like people do is like, they almost get certifications, and then now they're like, I can blank, I can be an accountant, I can be a teacher, I can be a doctor.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I just like show up, there will be work for me to do, and I will do the work, and then everything else will work out okay. And in reality, like you guys, we were chatting about this, and we sort of went like, that is not how we interpret that quote. However, you could see how one might look at it so simply, right?
Yeah, and I can see why the 90% of success is just showing up. Like, I can see why that feels right, like I feel in a way, because I think we have to also define like what we say as success, because I think that's what maybe the difference is here. Because if you think about that book, we've talked about it on our other podcast, that making math moments that matter podcast, about Atomic Habits is the book that we talked about there. And it was like thinking about how do you build habits so that you can achieve your goals and achieve what you want. And some of those atomic habits, like break it down at these minute levels, right? It's like, if you want to become, a runner, you want to be able to run 10K, the first, break it down into small steps. Like, what is a small step you could do? It's like, wake up, and put your shoes by the bed. And it's like, by doing that one thing, that's going to like lead to the next thing. So you can see that it's like, that's the showing up, right? Is like, just get my shoes on is me showing up, and then I'm going to be successful eventually. So I can see why that phrase makes sense. Like, if I'm just going to, show up in, other areas of, the things that your goals are, what you want, and think about like the mortgage, like in the mortgage field, like you talked about the life insurance field, Kyle, but there's an 80% drop off in the mortgage agent field, because it's like, it's so easy to get your mortgage license, right? It's like you can go get it within a month, and sometimes you can probably get it within like 6 weeks. So super easy to kind of get it, but it's like, well, there's the show up part. And so I get the other side too, right, Kyle? It's like, I get the other side of like, okay, well, I just showed up, I got it, but there's actually a ton of things to do to actually achieve the success that a lot of us think, our expectations are. So I can see both sides here, whereas like, let's kind of get first steps rolling. And that defines a lot of successful people and successful pathways. But to carry down that pathway is a lot more than just, say, showing up.
Real estate is such an interesting business because, there's a very small percentage of the agents that are doing almost all of the business. And, I've heard this time and time again where people will, say they just want to get their real estate license, and then they expect the ATM to start printing the money. In fact, I had someone who was working with me previously, when they were working on their license while they were doing some admin work, and their partner had said, "Just get your license. We're going to be so rich." And it was just such a lack of understanding of how much work real estate is. And maybe that's because the TV shows and all those kinds of things. And the opportunity is incredible. Like, the sky is literally the limit. You can make as much money as you want. The caveat being, you've got to do the work for it. So the other day I was chatting with a real veteran real estate agent, and he's on some committee with the local real estate board. And he said, "Matt, do you know that 64% of local agents didn't do any deals in the last year? Like, zero deals." I was shocked. I
That's
figured it was
crazy, eh?
a large percentage, but to be the overwhelming majority of people, I was shocked. And then he said, of that remaining 36%, he said a very small number of agents are doing the overwhelming amount of the business. And so with real estate, when I initially got my license, thinking I would just do deals for myself, for our investments, but in having decided to go full bore into it, it's definitely not a matter of just showing up, because there's so much to learn, so much to improve on always. And as I've gotten deeper in my understanding of real estate, it's almost like I heard a friend of ours, Erwin, talking on a podcast about jujitsu, and he was talking about this black belt who said that he only knew 50% of all there was to know, or something like that, about jujitsu. And I thought, real estate is like that. It's like, the more I learn, the better I get, the more I appreciate how much I still have yet to learn. And so a lot of times you'll hear people say they got into real estate because they love houses. I just love houses so much. That's actually
Right.
the wrong criteria to use to pick your real estate agent. It's not if you love houses. Do you love problem solving? Do you love working with people? Do you love complex solutions to challenging problems? Do you love negotiating? Do you love skill building? Do you love always getting better? It's about so much more than just saying, "I love houses. Like, I watch a lot of HGTV." Like, it's not that at all. That's just showing up. That is just showing up. And I oftentimes critique the real estate industry, of which I'll be 3 years this month. I'll have had my license for. So many realtors think it's a lifestyle, and it's actually a business. So just showing up in real estate, you will get slaughtered. Now, when I was a teacher, yeah, let's admit it, there was a lot of just showing up. And that's what I love about being an entrepreneur, is like, the incentive is massive, because the disincentive, the not showing up part, means, you make nothing. You make absolutely nothing. The upside is, if you're going to put that last 10% in, the sky is absolutely the limit. And my experience in a relatively short time in real estate has certainly been proof positive that that going above and beyond, that pushing really hard, and that always wanting to learn and improve, can just lead to untold success.
That is such a fascinating, stat that you shared there. And that was just here locally, but I'm going to guess that it's very similar in other places, right? So just here in Windsor, Essex. However, that is, it reminds me of the 80-20 rule, right? This idea that like 20% of, and you could fill in the blank on this. So I'm going to say, like, in general, like 20% of the agents are doing 80% of the business, is like a rule of thumb. Like there's tons of research that goes on there. And if you also look at it on the other hand, I'm going to guess that, think about like your clients, Matt, there's probably like, 20% of your clients take up 80% of your time. Right. And I can't remember which book that was in, but they were saying, listen, if you can identify who the 20% is that you want, awesome. But if you can also identify the 20% you don't want, that's even better, right? Because then you can kind of eliminate that from 100%. That world. And, you got me thinking about this 80-20 rule. And it's almost like when you think about this original quote, 90% of success in life is just showing up. I love, John, you talked about habits and the idea that oftentimes the habits we set are what set you up. And I'm going to argue that's probably what Woody Allen was saying. He's like probably saying like the hardest part is positioning yourself to get yourself in the motivation, the situation to be able to do the work. But then the real hard work is that, for him, he's the other 10%, but really you could look at it as 80-20 and say the other 20% is the real hard work, because now that you have shown up, the question is, what's your definition of showing up? And I'm going to argue, Matt, your definition is very different from maybe somebody else's of just showing up. And this can happen in so many different industries, and again, we're not going to pick on, say, education. I think it's everywhere. Like I truly do. When you go into a bank and there are financial advisors there, they are not all equal. I'm going to guess that like 20% of those people are going to probably have like 80% of the successful portfolios, or the more happy clients, or the more satisfied clients. And this is just true. So it's like, how do we interpret this rule to go, okay, it's really important that we show up. But then I think the next question is, for that other percentage, what are we doing when we show up so that we can maximize that opportunity, that time, that commitment, so that we see the greatest results out the other end?
Well, think of it like this. So if you're imagining, say, a timeline, or let's just say a number line. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'm holding my hands up.
Ooh, math teacher, John shows up.
I'm going with a length. So you're thinking of a length, right? So it's like you naturally think 90% of my success takes up most, 90% of this number line, right? That and then there's like a little gap at the end. That's the 10%. But in terms of like what work is required, that number line is skewed, right? Like the 90% of your success is like maybe it's still that length, but that 10% chunk is way longer in terms of like how much work is required to achieve that gap. Like so you think about that, like you can put that first step, like what are those little baby steps that get me there? Positioning myself to be that successful person in that 90% gets me there. But then this chunk, it's long. It's going to take a lot of work. It takes a lot of reps to get in. It's going to take a lot of like dedication, a lot of learning to go that extra 10% versus that first 90%. Like I think that's a good visual to think about. It's not a linear, relationship between the two quantities there. And it often reminds me of like, those folks that are like the 90% rule also reminds me of like some of those folks that says like, Kyle, we used to use the phrase like B+ work. Like, let's just get the B+ work out, because that's like stepping up to the plate, right? Like if you can get it out, that's the hardest part. Then perfecting it up to like A+ work is the extra, going the extra mile to actually achieve the real success, instead of like just getting up to it. Now I think about real estate investing, and I think positioning yourself in terms of your investing goals, in your, that 90% is a big chunk to step up to the plate, to get yourself in a position to be like, yes, I want to take this step, and that's going to make me successful. And I think that part's true. But then the rest of that, the other 10% of this portion here in terms of real estate investing is managing your expectations, right? Like I can step up to the plate. And that took a lot of work. It took a lot of learning, and that's going to put me in that success spot. That's the 90% of achieving success. But that 10%, it's like, well, am I ready for when, the shit hits the fan? Or am I ready for when this thing happens over here? Or am I ready for a downturn? Or like am I prepared? Like, am I ready to do these other things that are required, instead of just being like, I'm a winner because I stepped up to the plate.
Right. And, it reminds me, John, you and I, for, past 10 years doing keynotes and workshops with educators. And, there was a phrase we used all the time because math teachers do this. And I want to make a connection to investing, but really you can make a connection to anywhere in life, is that in math class, we tend to over proceduralize things, meaning it's like we try to rush. We called it the rush to the algorithm, the rush to the steps. So most people remember math class as like memorizing the steps, the definitions, how to do this, how to do that, but not necessarily really understanding it. And that leads to a poor understanding of mathematics in general. No connections, no real, we'll call it like substance there, right? It just becomes a big cookbook of all these different things that you might be able to do, or maybe not. Maybe you can't even apply it in the real world because you don't fully understand it. And when I look at this and what we're talking about, the same is true really in any other aspect of life. If I show up on the scene and I am a nurse and I'm like, I'm just going to proceduralize everything that nurses do. And I come in and I'm like, when I go and I show up, I do this, this, and this, and that's it. And I'm not willing to put in that extra effort, that, that 10% that you are articulating, John. It's like, you're not going to do a great job at it. And the same is true when we talk about investing and wealth building. And that's really, I think, the main message here that we want to work towards, is like, you can show up, and that's the first step. Even though it's like, we're calling it, Woody Allen's calling it 90% of the work, or the, the most important, 90%. The reality is what you do after is going to be key, because the reality is that investing is not 100% procedural. Take what you can and use those rules to guide you, right? Use that as your filter. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the biggest work happens once you do that 90%. So you come in, you say, hey, I want to get into blank. I want to, most people say, I want to invest. You think about that. That's like, there is so many different like rabbit holes you can go on. And most of our calls that we have to help people to kind of like hone in on what are these, like, what is this person bringing to the table? What is their, let's say their experience in investing, and what's their real end goal? We have to help them get there, because they say, I want to invest. And usually people want returns and better returns.
That's what they're asking for.
But the reality is like, okay, there's so much more work to do here, because even if you decide and you're like, I like the sounds of that investment, I like the sounds of real estate, 3 silver bullets. Oh my gosh, that's great. I want to do that too. That is not going to work if that's all you've done. It's like, you've made a decision to do that. Great. But now the real hard work really is, in front of you, because the reality is like, what's going to happen when I run my analysis? We do the fundamentals, we do the technicals, like all those things. And then we get into a deal and you end up like, I don't know, a guy I know, Matt, who found out that there was somebody still living in, a property that, that they once had. Matt, I don't know if you want us to bring that one up, but that one's recent memory for you. And the
Very scary
reality
guy
is,
too.
guess
Very
what?
scary guy.
Hey, I'm going to guess that you didn't have a procedure for that one, did you now, Matt?
But I had the resourcefulness to reach out and find someone who did.
Mhm.
They were pretty impressive. I like so much of both of what you said, and it I guess it really it hit me here that probably a lot of our listeners are sitting at the 90% by simply listening to our podcast. They're
Agreed.
showing up to the podcast. They're listening. They're interested. And listen, as a teacher myself, I got stuck in just the learning part of real estate. I wanted to read every book, listen to every
Mm.
podcast, because that's how I've gotten better at a lot of things, is learning through others' experiences. Success leaves clues, as they say. And I think the next step for people, though, is action. And the lack of action is that last 10%. I had dinner.
Totally.
I had my
Totally.
real estate partner, Doris, and her boyfriend over for dinner. And Doris has been in the industry for 30 years. They came over for dinner on Sunday. And Leslie was saying to Doris, my wife, she was saying, what's so remarkable about just listening to Matt? He's on the phone all the time. He's talking to people. She said, I hear how much the way he is able to talk to people has changed and evolved and just gotten so much better from when he first began in real estate to now. And so that action for me became just having to learn, and not just having to learn, but having to take that learning and put it into action. So practicing, like experiencing opposition, and then finding the opportunity in that opposition, right? Like diving in and realizing that screwing up or failing or not closing a deal or not getting someone to list with you. Like now I practice almost like radical responsibility. Like if something doesn't
Mhm.
happen, if a deal doesn't work, I don't get a listing or some, I always look at what I could have done differently. And this has been a
Hmm.
big evolution for me. Um, I think I'm responsible for everything, because the flip side of that is that also suggests that I believe that I have the opportunity or the ability to make any opportunity happen, for me. And so I think that for our listeners, if you're at that 90%, if you're out there listening, if you've been intrigued and engaged in the learning, the next step is to take the action.
Mhm.
And for Kyle, John, and I, we have a lot of conversations behind the scenes on how do we help all of these intelligent learners, people who are interested in this stuff? How do we help you move forward to action? Because otherwise, I know people who've been spinning their wheels in investing for years, if not
Mhm. Mhm.
decades,
Mhm.
without taking that action.
Something, I think it hit home, or it hurt. It hurt deep when you were like, you'd spent time reading all these books, and it's like, but how much action did you actually take? And it reminded me of something, we've quoted Alex Hormozy a lot lately, and he had said, tons of people quote all the time, oh, the top CEOs read 50 books a year, and they'll quote, oh, I read, 25 books this year, or I read this many books this year. Like it's a big thing to claim that I read so many, we're talking like self-help books, leadership books, like these kinds of things, like action books, right? Like, and Hormozy's like, that is all crap, because it's like, if you're going to read 50 books, like there's no way that you read 50 books and then put 50 pieces of action into place that year.
Not to mention each one has more than one piece, right? I'm sure.
Totally. He's like, I will read, if I'm lucky, I'll read one book this year, and I will spend that year putting that thing into action. And that's it. It's like, otherwise we're wasting our time thinking about all these things. Like that's the 90%. I read my book, and then my 10% is that next action, like you said, Matt. And so I'm curious, because you said there was like a moment, like you were reading all these books, and then it was like, and then you took action. Like was it an intentional, like, I know this and I had to take action, or was it unintentional, Matt? Like, it was like that I ended up just taking action, because I think listeners right now are like, I'm at the 90% because I've been reading books and I've been listening to this podcast. And what do I like? What pushes me to take the 10%?
I think for me in real estate, the that came from accountability. As soon as I had to be accountable to someone, that
Right.
forced me into action. And that forced me to to get relentless at growing my talent, because I knew that I had to have that weekly phone call with the coach that I'd hired, that I'd paid to hold me
Totally.
accountable, because I couldn't hold myself accountable. Because the learning part, I was like, that was the fun part for me. But now, what did I say when we first got on our call together? I was like, guys, today is one of those days I'm in momentum, crushing deals, cranked out a couple of deals today. And so now it's been a matter of structuring my days and my business around how I can get and stay in momentum. And I've become accountable to myself, although I still have that weekly call with my coach. She's expertly moved me along in my accountability spectrum, so that I know I'm going to kick my own ass most days, but she is always going to kick it even harder on our Thursday morning 7:30 a.m. call. So accountability has been everything for me.
I love it. I love it. That is so awesome. And I want, I guess to kind of lead ourselves here to big takeaways. And I'm going to share mine first. And, I think the big takeaway that I'm hearing is that really you can take this quote that we've sort of structured this whole episode around, whether you want to look at it as Woody Allen's 90% of, 90% of success is just showing up, whether you want to think of it as 80-20, really the number specifically, I think is less important, but I think what is really important is actually being aware of it. So maybe you're listening to this. I'm going to guess that you're more interested in wealth building and investing right now when you listen to this, but like, think about this for a second. The same could be true in life, right? You think about, maybe with your kids, and, really, if you think about it, the hardest part is probably just showing up. But then it's like, what are you going to do after that? Right. And it's like, if you can just take it one step further and think about it and actually be intentional about it and figure out, how do you have to be accountable? So Matt, you found a way to be accountable in the real estate world, right? We have to hold ourselves accountable, and we want to set ourselves up. John, you referenced habits and the ideas of, the idea of putting your shoes by the bed for, working out in the morning. And it's like, how can you structure your day, whether you're looking at it from life, family, friends, jobs, finances, wealth building, debt? Maybe you're like listening and you're like, I hope one day I'm out of debt so I can build wealth. It doesn't matter what it is. If you look at it through this lens, you can really start to think about, wait a second, life isn't happening to me, that I actually have some control over it. We go back to the example from the beginning. It's like a lot of people show up to their job. They just show up like that is 90% of the success, when in reality, it's like, sure, showing up was really maybe tough. You had to get up and you had to do all kinds of things to motivate yourself to get there. But once you're there, what is it that you're going to do? And what are you going to do that maybe isn't just the textbook procedure? Sure, know the procedure, know what everybody else also knows about what you're doing over there, but do that extra. And if you do that extra, it doesn't matter whether it's your job, your side hustle, or specifically here for wealth building, you'll be able to start looking and going, okay, I know what it is I need to do now that I'm learning about, and I've set myself up for 90%. We're going to do the hard 10% now, and we're going to actually act on this thing, and we're going to get ourselves a plan that we can put into motion.
Yeah. I love that. And, I just got back from a camping trip. We take a camping trip every year with my family, some friends I went to school with, and it's a big group. And we're up in, north of Kingston. It's pretty rocky up there, like in terms of the lakes, there's some great lakes and then huge cliffs. And so, I reminded of like my daughters want to jump off cliffs when we're there. We're like canoe out to an area.
Is there water at the bottom,
climb
at
up?
least?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully
That's
it's
not bad,
deep. It's deep. So it's like they get up to the top, and that when you peer over the edge, it's pretty scary, and you don't want to jump. You don't want to jump into that, all the way down, because it's so high up. It's super scary. But it's like I keep telling them, if you want to do it, all it really takes is 1 second of bravery. 1 second of bravery for you to just take that leap, because everything else is going to follow after that. So when I think about what we've been chatting about here as my kind of takeaway, it's like, that step up to the plate, that 90% is like thinking about that 1 second of bravery. It's like we're going to get there. And then there's that 90% of success, but it's like on the way down, right? Like on the way down, that's where the moment is created where you're changing your experience, you know, on the way down from that cliff. It's like that experience has completely changed from that 1 second of bravery. And that's when we think about our investing futures or wherever we wanted to do after that 10%, like that's like when we're on the way down, how am I changing that experience? Like those are how memories are made. Those are how experiences are made. And it's like, what are we doing to change our memories and our experiences to, you know, create the life that we want? And I think that's what we're really chatting about here too.
Well said.
I love it. I love it, guys. Great takeaways. I think for me, my takeaway from this is the 10% for a lot of us represents the work. We talk about passivity a lot in investing, and it's all work, folks. It's all work. Everything is work. The key, though, is to be able to get yourself in a position where you get to choose the work you are doing, to choose the work you want to do. I work far more hours as a realtor than I did when I was an educator. I loved both jobs, but I am happy to go to an open house on a Sunday afternoon because I get to meet people, find leads, sell houses, build relationships. It's all work. And I think a lot of investors make it seem as though investing is completely and entirely passive. So I think my takeaway is just remember, everything is work. Let's choose your work.
And whether, that work you're talking about is, work like putting in the time, the effort, the strategy, like all of those things you just articulated, or it's the work, staying up, sweating because someone won't get out of the house you just bought. They're both work, right, Matt? So, for you who, and you think about that bravery there that John just mentioned, right? You're going to need some of that. But ultimately, on the other hand, we do want to, as always, offer our support to those who are out there who may, I'm going to argue, like we said earlier, it's like you've done the 90%, like you're here into this right now. What you probably haven't done is that extra 10%. That extra 10% is probably not there. If you've already been investing and you're super confident and all those things, you're probably not reading the 100 books that, people say CEOs are reading, or listening to random podcasts like this one. You probably are looking for that like extra little bit, like you're searching. So you know what? Don't be a stranger. Reach out to us. We love having the calls. We learn a ton. And basically what I do every time I'm on a call, and I know you guys do this too, sometimes we're on calls together if our schedules all align, but we're really trying to learn more about those who are out there listening to this show so that we know two things. First of all, how do we help you individually on that call? We want to help you with the next step. But then we also want to think about like what content would be best and most helpful for the invested teacher audience, right? Those invested students out there. So we learn so much from this process. Of course, I anticipate there will be a time where we might only be able to take a certain limited amount of calls. So, while this show is new and we're growing that audience, now is probably your best time to throw your hat in the ring. So reach out to us. Head over to investedteacher.com/JV. And actually, I believe on that link, and I could be wrong, but I believe on that link, you might not even be interested specifically in a JV. I think we're going to have to update that link there, fellas. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what we do is we try to do a needs analysis with you and really try to figure out, like, where are you in that journey? Are you at the, we'll call it the protection stage for your family? Like you're trying to figure out, hey, the best way to build your wealth is to make sure that you've got a good foundation. What do you have going on there? What are your next steps in order to make that happen? You don't want to be going out investing in real estate when you haven't taken care of the home front, right? Maybe you're at a point where, hey, you're looking for like a refinance because you want to be able to pull that seed money to hop on that next deal. You know what? We get you hooked up with John so he can guide you. And if he can't help you, he will point you in the direction where someone can. And then finally, if you're looking at, buying a first home, transitioning, downsizing, any of those pieces, maybe it's an investment property, we get you hooked up with Matt, not only to provide you some guidance, some next steps. But ultimately, again, if it's not locally here in Windsor, Essex, Matt has an amazing Rolodex of contacts, and we put you in contact with them. So either way, we do this podcast to help you friends out. So don't be a stranger, and we'll chat with you on a call sometime soon.
Thanks so much. Listeners, we want to thank you. You have done the 90%. You've shown up. You're listening. We are so excited to have you as our audience. We so appreciate you. We would love for you to leave us a 5-star rating and review. I just got a great one on my real estate Google business page. And not only does it make me feel all warm and fuzzy, it helps other people find me. And that's what we want, to be able to share our message with others. So please leave us a 5-star rating and review. Share this podcast with your friends and your family. Turn the Christmas dinner conversation into one of investing instead of one of the news headlines. And make sure you hit follow on all of our social media platforms. That's at Invested Teacher.
Folks, we share some resources here in this episode. You can get the transcript and any other links that we talked about here over on our show notes page, which is investedteacher.com/episode 36. Again, that's investedteacher.com/episode 36. Also, if you should join our VIP club. Head on over to investedteacher.com/VIP club. Join that club every month. We are giving away prizes. Sometimes they're $50 gift cards, or that's the minimum, $50 gift card. And sometimes they are large items, like give away a couple Roombas, or TV, or maybe even your mortgage payment. So head on over to investedteacher.com/VIP club and join our club.
All right there, invested students. Class dismissed. The content is for informational purposes only. Make sure that you do not construe any such information or other material related to Invested Teacher as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice.